Hello, in this video I'll show you how to make the ultimate fudgy gluten-free brownie. I have another video on how to make an easy gluten-free brownie. This recipe is a little bit more involved, but it's so worth it to have that fudgy texture. In a large bowl, I combine a half cup or 1.6 ounces of cocoa powder. I also add in a teaspoon and a half of instant coffee or espresso. Then I boil water in my tea kettle and measure out a half cup plus 2 tablespoons. It's important that the water is boiling or near boiling because this is going to allow us to bloom the cocoa powder. Blooming the cocoa powder is going to improve the taste of the brownies. This is because the cocoa powder is made up of solid particles, and those solid particles trap in the molecules for flavor. Those flavor molecules come from roasting the cocoa beans and also the fermentation process that's used to make the cocoa beans and cocoa powder. I stir the water, cocoa powder, and instant espresso together and then set this off to the side while I work on the other ingredients. I use 5 tablespoons of melted butter for this recipe. I like to cut the butter into smaller pieces so that it melts faster in the microwave. Then I place the butter onto my kitchen scale and zero out the weight. Next, I measure out 2.5 ounces of a good quality, high-fat dark chocolate into this bowl. Using a combination of cocoa powder and melted chocolate is going to increase the fat content in our recipe, which will result in a chewier, more fudgy brownie. The melted butter should still be hot enough to melt the dark chocolate. I stir everything together until it's fully incorporated. If it's not melting completely, you can put this in the microwave for just a few seconds until it does fully melt. Then I pour the melted butter and chocolate into our bloomed cocoa powder and whisk to combine. Next, I add in 2 eggs plus 2 egg yolks. The extra egg yolks are beneficial because egg yolks act as emulsifiers, which will prevent the fats that's in the melted butter and in the melted chocolate from separating out from the rest of the ingredients. I add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla and then whisk to combine. For a thick, fudgy brownie, we don't want to add a lot of air into the batter, otherwise you would end up with a cake-like brownie, so I whisk just enough to fully incorporate all of the ingredients. Then I add in 2 cups of granulated sugar and 1/3 cup of brown sugar. It might seem like a lot of sugar, but this makes a pretty decent sized recipe, and the use of granulated sugar is what's going to give us a nice flaky top on the top of the brownies. I personally really like the taste of brown sugar, but if you don't want brown sugar, you could do 2 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. Next, I add in 11.5 ounces of gluten-free all-purpose flour. The mix I'm using has xanthan gum in it, but if the mix you're using doesn't, you'll have to supplement some xanthan gum. 11.5 ounces is a little bit less than 2 cups. Then I add in 3/4 teaspoon of salt and stir everything together. Then I whisk the flour into the brownie mix. Again, I'm stirring just until this is fully incorporated, and I'm trying not to whip air into the batter. After the flour is mixed into the brownie batter, I add in 1 cup of dark chocolate chips. I fold this in using a spatula rather than a whisk because the chocolate chips tend to get stuck in the whisk. Then I spray the baking dish with oil and then build a parchment sling before pouring in the brownie batter. The parchment sling is going to be useful to remove the brownies easily from the pan. You can use either a 9x13 or an 8x8 pan for this brownie recipe. Honestly, it's built for a 9x13 pan, but I like a really thick brownie, so I like to use the 8x8 pan. The only difference is the impact on cooking time. I trim up the edges of the parchment sling before putting this in the oven to bake. I bake the brownies at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 to 35 minutes if they're in a 9x13 pan, and for about 50 minutes if it's in the 8x8 pan. The brownies are cooked when they're between 180 and 190 degrees Fahrenheit in the center. At this temperature, the eggs are fully cooked, but the brownies are still going to retain a really nice fudge-like texture. I let the brownies cool for about 10 minutes, and then I remove them from the pan by lifting up on the parchment sling. Removing the brownies from the pan rather than letting them cool in the pan is especially important if you're using a glass pan, because glass pans have better heat retention and can actually overcook the brownies. I'm rarely able to let the brownies cool completely before I cut them because I really enjoy eating a warm brownie. I found that the trick to cutting a brownie when warm is to use a plastic knife. It doesn't stick as badly when using a metal knife. These brownies did crack a bit on the top. Part of that is because of the granulated sugar crust that we formed, and the other reason is because I just couldn't wait for these to cool before cutting them. If you are able to wait for these to cool before cutting them, they don't crack as bad on the top. These are absolutely the ultimate fudgy gluten-free brownie. The texture on the inside of the brownie is just amazing, and the crispy crust on the top from the granulated sugar is such a good complement to the fudgy texture. Thanks for watching this video on how to make the ultimate fudgy gluten-free brownie. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as always, like and subscribe to see more content.